I have problems. I have a lot of problems. And today I thought I would talk to you about my quilting problems and what I'm working on doing to solve them. I'll give you a little bit of history about how I came across these problems, and also I'm going to give you a little bit of history about problem solving day, because I think that is the biggest lesson that I learned is about problem solving day. Last year my sewing space was in the living room. I had the small desk that I use as my sewing table in the living room, and it worked great there. The sewing room was in the center of action. When anybody came to the door, I was right there to be able to answer it. It was close to the kitchen and close to the steps where I could go upstairs to iron my fabric, and everything was great. But there was a problem in that every time I opened the door, people could see my work in progress on the table, and it looked cluttery and messy for people to be able to see stuff like that because they didn't really understand. And so last year I decided that I'm going to move the sewing area here to this family room where things can be a little bit more secluded. It's out of the way of the front door. It's actually by the back door. My dog is walking around. And this space works great for me. The lighting is wonderful in here. It's away from the front door, so I can keep all my things around while I'm working on them. And I can work on more than one project at a time without worrying about making too much of a mess. But I noticed that I was taking some shortcuts. When the sewing room was in the living room, I could just run up and down the steps to press my fabric. And that was something that I actually did on purpose, so that one, the ironing board wasn't downstairs and adding clutter to the living room, but also because it gave me the exercise that I needed going up and down the steps. But now that the sewing room is here in this family room, it's harder for me to go all the way around to go upstairs to iron my fabrics. And so I noticed in December I was taking a lot of shortcuts in ironing fabrics. Another problem that I'm having with this space is the lack of a design wall. When the sewing room was in the living room, I could just shove the coffee table out of the way and put the blocks on the floor, and then I could just choose a layout that way, and I could take pictures as I needed to do that. And that worked out okay for me because I don't really need like a fancy design space, and there's really not a lot of space in the house to be able to put a design wall. You know, there's decorations all over the walls, and I have a lot of windows in this house, so there's not a lot of space to put a big design wall on. And so those are the problems that I had at the beginning of this year. On this last problem solving day, I decided to go ahead and change that up. So let me tell you first the history of problem solving day, and then I'll tell you about our problem solving day that we had recently. So problem solving day for me started when I was a young adult. I was doing laundry and the knob to the washer broke. It just snapped off, and there was no way for me to be able to glue it together again, because that was the first thing I tried is it possible for me to super glue this thing together? And it wasn't. And so then I went to the store that I bought the washer from, which was Sears, and they had a wall at the Sears department store of parts and things, but it didn't have a knob that I needed, and there was no one around that I could ask. And so I went back home and just dealt with the problem. The knob has a little thing that sticks out, like a little shaft that sticks out, and I knew the turn, how much approximate spacing that I needed to turn to go from off to start. And so I would just turn it with my hands. It was painful sometimes, and it was hard. Sometimes it was hard to get a grip of the knob, but it was doable, and it was just a couple seconds every week that I had to deal with this problem. But then it kept going on and on, even though it was just a small problem, just a couple seconds of inconvenience every week. It was a couple seconds of inconvenience every week for 2 years. Every week for 2 years. So one day I was at work. It was my lunch hour. It probably was a below zero day because I wasn't walking, and maybe I was just bored, and I thought, well, what can I do to fix this problem? I have no idea the first thing to do to fix this, because I don't want to pay for an appliance person to come to my house, and because that would be too expensive for me to pay for something for such a small problem. And so at that time, I did have internet at work, and so I searched for a phone number for Sears. I thought, well, you know, even though it's hard for me to find somebody to help me when I'm there in person, maybe if I made a phone call, there might be somebody in customer service who can help me out. And so I looked up the phone number, and one of the phone numbers that popped up was a phone number for appliance parts. I don't remember the exact terminology, but it said something about appliance parts. What I wanted to do was I just wanted to have at least a first step, even though I was at work, I had to get back to work when my lunch hour was finished, so there's no way I could drive anywhere. I could at least make a tiny step towards getting this problem fixed. So I called the number, and the person answered the phone, and I told him about my problem, and he said, yeah, sure, come on in. And I was like, come on in? I didn't know there was a place like that. So, okay, that seems like a very simple solution. I have an address, and I have a way to fix this problem. And it turns out that this appliance place was on the street that I drove at least twice a week to go to school, so it was very easy for me to get there. It was convenient. I just never thought about stopping there because it looks more like a warehouse type of a thing and not something that regular people, regular shoppers could go into. But I was invited, so I think it would be fine if I went there. So I went there, and it is a room about the size of this room. It wasn't very big, but all over the walls there were very nice signs that said refrigerator, washer, whatever other appliance there were that they had. Once I got to washer, I didn't read the rest. The customer service person was talking to somebody, so I walked over to the wall, and right there was a knob. And so I took the knob, I took it to the person. I said, here's all my washer information. Will this thing work for me? And he said, yeah, it'll work. There was only one knob in the whole part section, so maybe all the knobs look the same. I don't know. And it was about $2, $2 to $5. It was a very inexpensive part. And I took it home, and I was able to just plug it in and problem solved, right? It was something that was very small. Like, it's not a big problem, but it felt like a life-changing thing for me, because usually there's so many things that in life that you have a problem and you don't try to fix it. You just let it go on and you try to adapt to it and get used to it. And this was a problem that is a fixable problem. It's a solvable problem. And it was something that kind of changed my perspective on life. That maybe when I have a problem, I should actually make an effort to solve it. So from then on, what I tried to do is to have more problem-solving days. One of the things that I had a lot of problems with at that time in my life was finances. And I'd created a budget, and I never really knew how to use it, because, you know, things change and you don't know how to adapt to making all of the changes. So it seemed like a waste of time, and solving my financial problems seemed like a very difficult thing to do, like a knot of thread, you know, like a big ball of thread, if you start pulling at it, it's going to start tangling even more rather than fixing things. Or a big bowl of safety pins that are open, you know, if you try to untangle those, you're going to get poked somehow or another. So it just seemed like it was too hard to try to fix my financial problems. But once I solved this washer problem, it changed my mindset. So what I did from then on was to try to solve another problem from time to time. And since finances was my biggest problem, that's basically what I worked on most of the time. And the way I did this is, you know, one day I would call to dispute a charge on my credit card bill, or another day I would make sure I return the Blockbuster videos or library book to make sure I didn't have to pay any late fees. And also for late fees, when I received a bill, I would go ahead and write out the check, put it in an envelope with a stamp on it, and put it by the door, so that the next payday I could just put all of the bills into the mailbox, and then I wouldn't have to pay late fees on those. Other things I did was I tried to compare insurance rates, and I think by that time I might have had internet, so I was comparing internet provider rates, things like that. Each day I would just work on one small thing, and together they added up to a lot. And that really is how I fixed my financial situation, one thing at a time. And since then, every time I went to the washer to do some laundry, I would thank my past self, because it was something that I took the effort to fix for myself. And I was really grateful that this problem was no longer in my life. It just felt like I was worthy somehow, right? That my past self had thought that my future self is worthy, or my present self is worthy. And so what I did then is to pay it forward to my future self. And so what I would do is maybe I'd set my clothes out ahead of time. Or maybe I just make sure the laundry was always done and the toilet paper was always stocked so that I wouldn't have any problems in the future. And then what I did was I started cooking double batches of things and then putting half of them in the freezer so that I would always have something to eat and I wouldn't have to spend a lot of money on processed food, and I could save money that way too. I started packing my lunches and eating healthier. It just snowballed, and life was more solvable to me once I started trying to solve it. So let's talk about this quilting problem solving day that I had recently. As I said, in the month of December, when I was putting my quilt blocks together for the 15 minutes to quilt challenge, I didn't lay out my blocks. I just started sewing them and hoping through serendipity that they would turn out okay, which I think they will because they're scrap quilts. But I really wanted to have a design wall. I just never thought about where it is that I could possibly place it. And I asked for help from my family, and they gave me an idea about just putting it here behind the door. It's a nice out-of-the-way place behind the door. I was really happy to be able to find a space without having to rearrange anything that I had on the walls or any of the furniture. I have plenty of space to move around and move quilt blocks around on the wall. As you can see, the design wall is all the way to the ceiling, and it goes all the way down to the floor. That's the foam core insulation that this is made with. That's just an extra piece that was too big for my wall. I like to leave it there though because it helps me make sure that the door knob doesn't slam into the design wall. So it's a little protection for me for now until I come up with a different system for that. You can see that the quilt stays on the wall without any additional help. There's no pins or anything to keep it down. You just put it on there and it sticks. If I play with it, it will fall off though. And here you can see again, piece of fabric. Just put it down. And sometimes it helps just to use a little friction to push it down just to make sure it stays. The other change that I made is over here. I brought my iron downstairs. I decided that this table here, instead of just having it be a staging area, I'm going to bring my iron downstairs. Right now it's just sitting on a wheel pressing mat. This is an over-the-door ironing board, and I think it's going to work fine for now, but eventually I want to turn this whole table into an ironing board so that I have more width to work around. The other thing I wanted to show you here is I moved my end table from the corner, from the right side of the sewing machine to the left side of the sewing machine, because this end table has a strip, electricity strip, and this will make it a lot easier for me to plug and unplug my iron. I don't have a place to put my extra pins and things like that on the right side of my sewing machine, but I'll find a different system for that. Sometimes when you make a change, you have to make some other changes to go along with it to make things work best. And there'll still be some other things that I will need to change from time to time. My sister was able to fix my tripod. My tripod that holds the phone kept sliding back and forth. She was able to fix it so that it doesn't do that. And so now I actually have 3 problems that have been solved, maybe even more. So I have a design wall, I have an ironing table, I even have a convenient way to plug in the iron, which I didn't have when it was upstairs. And I also have my tripod that's fixed, so now there's a bunch of problems that have been solved. And I think if I just keep it up, keep solving problems as I come across them, life will be smooth for me. So let me know in the comments. I'm curious to know what kind of problems have you had that you just kept putting up with for a long time. It's just so easy to just accept the problems as they come and just put up with them, just because it feels like the amount of time that it's going to take to solve them is longer than the amount of time that it takes to just deal with them. But to me, over time, all of that, having a whole bunch of problems, they add up, right? All of these problems, they add up, and over time they burden you and make you feel less worthy. And when you take the time to fix them, then you realize that you are worthy and that you should solve the problems that you have, even if they are really small and tiny ones. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of your support, and we'll see you in the next video.